At Denver International Airport, the rhythm is relentless: boarding calls, rolling suitcases, hurried footsteps echoing through wide corridors. Among them is Officer Thomas, a quiet, disciplined man who's walked these halls for over a decade. At his side is Max, a senior K-9 unit with graying fur and weary eyes, a veteran in his own right. They are a familiar pair, often unnoticed, often forgotten. But on this particular winter morning, something feels different. Thomas can't quite explain it. Maybe it's the subtle change in Max's pace. Maybe it's the way the dog keeps glancing back at him, ears twitching, tail low. Trained as he is, Thomas has learned to trust Max's instincts honed not just by training, but by something deeper. Something primal. That morning, in a quiet corner near Gate 37, Max stops. Dead still. Then, he barks. Once. Sharp. Urgent. What follows isn't just procedure. It's fate unraveling in real time. Officer Thomas felt his pulse quicken. He didn't understand why, but something inside him stirred, an invisible thread pulling him toward the far corner of the waiting area. His eyes followed Max, the black German shepherd, as the dog stopped, ears tilted, body tense. Then Thomas saw her. A woman. Alone. Sitting awkwardly on a bench near Gate 12. Her posture was slumped, as if the weight of the world rested on her shoulders, and something more. Her arm cradled her abdomen protectively. Her face was pale, lips parted as she gasped for air. She was pregnant. Very pregnant. And clearly, something was very wrong. Max took the lead. He moved toward her slowly, almost gently, letting out a low, persistent whine. He nudged her leg with his nose, as if pleading, "Please notice. She needs help." Thomas stepped in quickly, kneeling beside her, concern etched across his face. "Ma'am? Can you hear me?" he asked softly, placing a hand near her shoulder but not touching yet. Her eyes fluttered open, barely. She tried to speak, but her words came out broken and strained. Pressure, can't breathe. A cold wave washed over him. Thomas grabbed the radio on his shoulder. "This is Officer Thomas. Medical emergency at Gate 12. Pregnant female, possible respiratory distress. Request immediate medical assistance." His voice was steady, but inside, he was racing. Every second felt stretched, unbearable. Around them, the noise of the airport faded into nothing, the rolling luggage, the voices, the boarding calls, all drowned out by the sound of her labored breathing and the soft, steady whimpering of Max, who stood like a silent guardian beside them. Thomas kept his eyes on her, heart thudding. He didn't know how Max had sensed it. Maybe it was training. Maybe something more. But in that moment, with everything else fading away, Thomas understood one thing with perfect clarity: this woman, and the child she carried, were standing on the edge of something irreversible. And somehow, some way, fate had chosen them to stop it. The moments that followed blurred into a chaotic, surreal sequence. Thomas didn't think, he just acted. Dropping to his knees beside the woman, he gently caught her limp body before it could slump completely off the bench. Her breathing was shallow now, ragged, as though every inhale took an impossible effort. Her face had gone pale, and a cold sweat slicked her brow. "It's okay. Stay with me. Help is on the way," he murmured, his voice as steady as he could manage, though inside he was anything but calm. His heart pounded, his instincts screaming that this wasn't just a fainting spell, something was terribly wrong. Max barked, short, sharp, commanding. The sound echoed through the terminal like an alarm bell, slicing through the low hum of conversation and distant boarding calls. Heads turned. The crowd began to shift, some stepping back instinctively, others frozen in place, unsure of what they were witnessing. Thomas's eyes darted around desperately. Where were the medics? How long had it been? 30 seconds? A minute? It felt like an eternity. Come on, he whispered, his hand still wrapped firmly around the woman's as she clung to him with trembling fingers. Then she gasped, her whole body tensed, a convulsion rippling through her. She gripped his sleeve, her voice cracked with panic. My baby, he's not moving, please. I can't lose him. Her words hit Thomas like a gut punch. He froze, just for a split second. A knot of dread tightened in his stomach. This wasn't just about her now, there was a child. A life inside her. One that might already be slipping away. Without hesitation, he jumped to his feet and ran to the nearby emergency station, ripping open the red first aid cabinet mounted on the wall. I need a doctor. A nurse. Anyone with medical training, he shouted over the din. Out of the crowd, a young woman with wide, anxious eyes stepped forward. I'm a med student, she said, almost breathless. I can help. Good. We need you now. She knelt beside the woman, checking her pulse, her vitals, assessing what she could. Thomas knelt beside her again, still holding the woman's hand, anchoring her to consciousness. And Max didn't budge. The usually restless dog was stone still, pressed close to the woman, his ears alert, his eyes tracking her every movement. He knew. Somehow, he knew. Footsteps thundered down the terminal. Red uniforms. Medical gear. Finally. Over here! Thomas yelled, waving his arm. Relief swept through him, but it was laced with fear. They might still be too late. Paramedics surrounded her, oxygen mask, gloves, hurried exchanges of urgent jargon. One of them gently pressed on her belly, exchanging a tense glance with a colleague. The other prepped the stretcher. Thomas stepped back, his hands shaking slightly now, adrenaline crashing in waves. He looked down at Max, who nudged his leg gently with his nose. You knew, Thomas whispered, his voice cracking. You knew something was wrong, before any of us did. In that moment, as the woman was lifted onto the stretcher and rushed away, Thomas realized something chilling and awe-inspiring. Max hadn't just been alert. He had sensed it. And maybe, just maybe, he had saved 2 lives. The terminal had returned to its regular rhythm, the murmur of rolling suitcases, announcements echoing overhead, the hum of everyday travel resuming. But for Thomas, everything remained suspended. The world moved on, yet he stood still, caught in the quiet aftermath of something extraordinary. He looked down the hallway where the paramedics had vanished moments ago, wheeling the young woman away. The image lingered in his mind, her pale, frightened face, the trembling in her voice as she clutched her belly and whispered, "He's not moving." It wasn't just a moment, it had carved itself into his memory. Max stood beside him, no longer tense, no longer sniffing or growling. Just there. Present. Grounded. His steady presence was like a tether to reality. Thomas dropped to one knee, placing a firm, trembling hand on the dog's shoulder. The thick fur was familiar, comforting. His voice cracked as he spoke, barely above a whisper. You knew, didn't you? Somehow, you knew. He rubbed Max's neck slowly, letting the silence speak for them. His eyes stung, not from exhaustion or stress, but from something deeper. Gratitude. Awe. A creeping realization that what had just happened couldn't be explained by logic or training manuals. Thomas wasn't a man prone to sentiment. His job demanded vigilance, not emotion. Yet here he was, swallowing hard, overwhelmed by the weight of what could have been lost, and what had just been saved. From behind him came a soft voice. "Sir, I just wanted to say, I've never seen anything like that." It was the young medical student. She stepped closer, her hands still stained faintly from the emergency, her expression touched with wonder. She looked not at Thomas, but at Max, with a reverence normally reserved for heroes. Thomas stood slowly, brushing off his uniform out of habit. He nodded, his voice thick. "Neither have I." "He didn't just bark," she said quietly. "He reacted. Like he understood something none of us could." Thomas looked down at Max again, who now sat with calm focus, eyes watching the world like he always had, but something had changed. There was a weight to that gaze now. A wisdom. "He's done a lot over the years," Thomas said, more to himself than to her. But that was different. They stood in silence, the chaos of the terminal fading around them. For just a moment, the world felt still again, held in quiet awe of the connection between a man, a dog, and the life they might have just saved. And in that pause, Thomas felt something shift inside him, not just pride, but something deeper. Respect. For the creature beside him. For the things beyond understanding. For the small, silent miracles that walk among us every day, unnoticed, until they are needed most. That evening, after the last flight had taken off and the buzz of the airport faded into a hum of fluorescent lights and distant announcements, Thomas remained in the dim security office. The world outside had moved on, but something inside him hadn't. He sat still, hunched slightly, elbows resting on the desk, watching the security footage replay again and again on the monitor. The screen flickered, there it was, Max stopping, rigid. Barking. Refusing to budge. And then the woman collapsing, her husband rushing to catch her as chaos bloomed around them. He had seen hundreds of hours of footage in his career, but this was different. This one made his throat tighten and his hands shake. Max was curled up beneath the desk, close but quiet, his chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. He wasn't just a dog. Not to Thomas. He was his shadow, his partner, his only real connection to something real in a world that often felt hollow. Thomas reached down, his fingers brushing Max's fur, and for a moment, he just stayed there, connected to something warm, something alive. His voice, when it came, was hoarse and raw. "You knew. Before anyone else. You knew." His phone buzzed, vibrating softly against the wood. He almost didn't check it, expecting a shift reminder, or an update from dispatch. But when he saw the message, he froze. "Baby is safe. They say it was a miracle. You and Max, thank you. Emma, the husband." Thomas stared at the screen. His vision blurred. Not from exhaustion. Not from stress. But from something that had been buried deep for years, feeling. He leaned back slowly, his hand still resting on Max's side, and let the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. Not just relief. Not just pride. But something deeper, an understanding that all the mundane days, the overlooked hours, the quiet routines, they had led to this. A life saved. Two, actually. And in that quiet room, with only the soft hum of electronics and Max's breath for company, Thomas finally let out a breath he hadn't known he'd been holding. "You did more than good today," he whispered. "You reminded me why this job matters." Max stirred at the sound of his voice, lifting his head slightly. His eyes met Thomas's, calm, steady, knowing. And in that look, Thomas saw it all: loyalty, instinct, partnership, love. It wasn't just about rules or badges. Sometimes, it was about listening to the ones who couldn't speak, but who always knew. And as the music swelled in his heart, gentle but full, Thomas realized something that would stay with him for the rest of his life. Some heroes walk on 2 legs. Others walk beside us on 4. The soft hum of the terminal returned as dawn broke across the sky, spilling light through the tall windows like a quiet blessing. Thomas stood still, his hand resting gently on Max's harness, both of them bathed in the golden hush of morning. Around them, the world resumed, families greeted loved ones with sleepy smiles, the smell of fresh coffee drifted in from a nearby kiosk, and flight announcements crackled back to life. But inside Thomas, everything had changed. He wasn't a man of many words, never had been. Years in uniform had taught him to act quickly, stay calm, and move on. But today was different. The events of the night clung to him like morning fog, soft but impossible to shake. A woman and her unborn child were alive because of a dog's intuition, and maybe, just maybe, something greater than that. He glanced down at Max, who now sat beside him, still and alert, yet somehow at peace. The dog wasn't seeking praise or recognition. He never did. There was no ceremony, no applause. Just the quiet pride in a job done right. Thomas crouched beside him, placing a steady hand between Max's ears. "You felt something I didn't," he murmured, his voice low, filled with wonder. "You knew." He felt a swell of emotion rise in his chest, gratitude, awe, something close to reverence. Not just for Max, but for the fragile beauty of moments that defy explanation. The ones that remind us that life doesn't always make sense, but sometimes, that's what makes it meaningful. He rose slowly, straightening his jacket as passengers filed past them. No one knew. No one even glanced twice. The world spun on, unaware that a miracle had passed quietly through Gate 17 just hours ago. Thomas didn't mind. He preferred it that way. With one last look at the sunrise beyond the glass, he gave a quiet nod and turned to walk away. Max trotted beside him, in sync, as if their hearts beat to the same rhythm. They didn't need recognition. Because deep in their bones, in the unspoken connection between man and dog, they knew. They had been part of something rare. Something real. And that was enough.